Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am wrapping up my reading for the month of November. But before we get into that, happy Spotify Wrapped season for all who celebrate. I hope your Wrapped wasn't sabotaged by your children or partner, and that it reflects who you are as a person. Here's mine. I essentially appear to be much older than I actually am with my selection of music this year, but it is what it is. You know, you can't deny these are good artists. So anyway, I hope yours has been kind to you as well. Please feel free to share down in the comments below if you wish. All right, let's get into the wrap up. So today, as I said, we are wrapping up my reading for the month of November, and I cannot believe we are already in December. It has flown by, it really has. Okay, so this month I read 5 books, or at least finished 5 books, and here they are. And you'll notice at the beginning of the month is it's sort of like the spooky season books that I didn't quite finish before the end of October, so I didn't include in my wrap-up. Oh, by the way, sorry, Xanthi is here with us today as well, having a snooze behind me. My other cat, Charlie, is also having a snooze on the other side of the camera. So, spooky season books, let's start with those. So the first one was this one, Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. This was a book that somebody here on this channel, someone in the comments was like, read that book, you're going to really like it. And thank you to that person for the recommendation. I would say up until the final 2 chapters, I was really enjoying this book. And I was thinking this is going to be a 4-star read. And then something happens in the final 2 chapters of the book that felt like a betrayal from the author. And I was not okay. So I listened to this one on audiobook, and literally my face while I was listening to those final chapters was like, no. Like, this was my face. I couldn't believe what was going on. And I was like, after it finished, I was just sitting there and I was like, what just happened? What just happened? Yeah, so if you're okay with that, then this could be the book for you. Generally speaking, this is see you later, Xanthi. This is a medium-paced witchy book. Has an interesting take on the concept of witches. It has a very sort of inclusive view and sort of explores the concept of trans witches, because in this world you can only be a witch if you're a woman. But what does that mean if you're a trans woman? And that's sort of a central theme that kind of runs through the book. And I thought it explored that pretty well. I liked the tension building. I liked, you know, the themes that were explored in the book. There were some things that weren't up until that point. There were some things that were not great about this book. I thought the character building was a bit patchy. So there's like a couple of characters, because you're looking at this from multiple perspectives, and I thought that the perspective of maybe 2 of the characters was pretty well developed, and you sort of grew to like those characters quite a lot. And then the other perspectives were less well developed, and that was a bit disappointing, I felt, which is why it wouldn't have been a 5-star read if what happened in the last 2 chapters didn't happen. Yeah, so yeah, it really did feel like a 4-star book, right up until that point. I will say the audiobook, if you are going to read this book, the audiobook is a great way to go. It's narrated by Nicola Coughlan. Coughlan? Is that how you say her name? You know, the actress. I'll put a picture of her up on the screen. You'll know who I mean. So she narrates the audiobook, and she did a really, really good job. There was one point where she did an Australian accent, and because I am Australian, I don't know, Australians are pretty critical of people doing our accents, and sometimes people do them really, really well, and then other times, yeah, so hers was a little bit questionable. It was okay, but it was questionable. But all of the other ones sounded good, but I guess if you're from the places she was doing accents for, maybe you would feel differently. I don't know. They sounded okay to me. But yeah, it was otherwise quite a good audiobook to listen to, so I would recommend that if you are going to consume this book. But yeah, be warned, you are going to be betrayed. Just FYI. So that was the first book that I read this month. The second one was also a witchy book, and that is Equal Rites by Terry Pratchett. This is my second Pratchett, and I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was really fun. So I loved the character of Escarina, we called her Esk throughout, and also Granny Weatherwax is a fabulous character, and I believe she comes back in other books in this the witch sequence, so I'm looking forward to that because I would like to read at least the witch sequence from the Discworld novels. So yeah, very much enjoyed her. The journey was good fun as well in this book. I listened to the audiobook of this one as well, and it was narrated by a lady called Indira Varma, who I had not heard of before. Her voice reminded me a little bit of Emma Thompson, like the way that her inflection and the way she spoke, so that was fun to listen to. And also on the audiobook there were guest appearances from Peter Serafinowicz and also Bill Nighy. The Bill Nighy bit was a bit weird. It was it's very small. It's a very, very short little bit, as is Peter Serafinowicz's part as well. But he did a fabulous job of his part, because he does the voice of Death. And I'm assuming that there's a series of these audiobooks and that he does Death in all of them. That would be really cool. So yeah, I might look into that for future ones. But yeah, the Bill Nighy bit was a little bit weird, and the audio quality was slightly different. So obviously it was recorded elsewhere. But yeah, it was a bit weird. But otherwise, this was a very, very good audiobook. It was a good choice to consume it that way. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It was 4 stars. Would recommend if you're looking for something a bit fun. So the Equal Rites is a bit of a play on words, obviously. Equal Rights, Rights. Did I spell that correct? I think I did. Equal Rights, but then it's Rites as in witch rights. And this is all about Esk, who is a young girl who has accidentally been bestowed the powers of a wizard. Which shouldn't happen because she's a girl. But it did happen, and Granny Weatherwax is attempting to sort of get her into the wizard school, and that's sort of the adventure that they go on, because generally speaking, wizards are boys, witches are girls. So in Discworld. So it was good fun. I really liked it. Definitely I'm going to pick up some more Terry Pratchett, because this is my second Pratchett. My first one was Going Postal, and I really loved that. So I'm glad that I was able to get to this one and enjoyed it as much as I did. Okay, the next one is a book that I read also on audiobook, but I don't have a physical copy of, and it is Why We Are Here by Briohny Doyle. So this was mostly a book about grief. But it was written very poetically, and it sort of had this cyclical kind of feel and style to it, where things would kind of come up and then they'd be revisited later on, and it sort of was kind of like building, almost like a snowball rolling and getting bigger as it goes down the mountain in the cartoons. I don't know if that really happens in real life. We don't have snow where I am, so. But anyway, that's by the by. That's entirely by the by. Anyway, so there were also these little motifs were returning repeatedly for emphasis, and the more that something came up, the more you were paid attention to it, But yeah, this was also highlighted the relationship between the woman. So this is a non-fiction book, and I didn't think. Oh wait, no, I did. It down here, the call number, because normally I have the book to hold up and I've written it on the thing. Got it on a post-it note. So the call number for this one is 823.4. So what I thought was a highlight of this book was Bryony Doyle's relationship with her dog, the way that it's characterized in the book. So she sort of talks about signaling to her dog and to other dogs that she is kind of talking. So this is a very much a dog book. So if you're a dog person, you'll probably really enjoy this, because she's kind of talking about the relationship between humans and dogs, and also talking a little bit about, because her, she ends up sort of dog training this person. She moves into a new neighborhood and ends up sort of inadvertently becoming a dog trainer for this person whose dog is a little bit out of control, and she's sort of working. So she references Caesar Milan quite a lot in it, and she's kind of talking about that. But she's also working through her grief at the same time for her partner who has passed away. And so, yeah, and that the way that is kind of talked about kind of builds as the book goes on. So she's sort of talking about grief in different ways, but she's also talking about human relationships with dogs and the way that we communicate with dogs. And that was really, really interesting. What else do I want to say? Yeah, so it was really, the communication was really beautiful, I felt, between her and the dog. And obviously, if you're a pet owner, you're probably somebody who sort of has some interesting feelings about how communication is working between you and your pet. You're attributing some things to them. It's definitely part of her healing process as she's going through. So I gave this one 3.75 stars. And yeah, it's definitely on the literary side of things. So if that's not your vibe, then this might not be for you. But yeah, I thought it was quite good. It took a little bit to get into, but then yeah, it really kind of worked for me. I read another of Bryony Doyle's books, would have been maybe last year or the year before, which was nominated. It would have been either for the Miles Franklin or for the Stella Prize. I can't recall which, but I'll put it up on the screen, and I'll put the book up on the screen as well, and link to my review of that book as well, if you're interested in my thoughts on other Bryony Doyle books. But yeah, it was very interesting and would recommend for people who love dogs, and maybe people who sort of tend more literary in their non-fiction. Yeah, and also fiction reading. If you're not a literary fiction person, probably not for you. Okay, the next one was a little bit of a disappointment, unfortunately. I was so disappointed because I picked, this was a cover by, really, and also the setting of this book is a setting I'm really, really interested in. I've read several books that are set in this time period and place, and it's something I'm super interested in because I used to work in this area. And so the book is Violet Kelly and the Jade Owl by Fiona Britton. I saw this in a independent bookshop that I was looking, wandering through, and was like, ooh, this looks interesting. Picked it up, read the blurb, was like, okay, this is ticking some boxes for me. It seemed like it was going to be a bit on the lighter side, which I'm okay with because I like to sometimes read things that are a little bit lighter. But it's set in a period of Sydney's history, so it's in 1930, so in the interwar period, which is a period of history that I really am interested in reading about. It's also set in sort of the area where I used to work. So I used to work in Surrey Hills in Sydney, if you know the area, which is very gentrified now, but used to be sort of like there was a lot of poverty. There were a lot of especially in this period of time, sly grog, drugs, prostitution, all of those kind of things were going on. And this book is set in that world, in that time and place that I'm really super interested in. And it is set in a brothel, a sort of high-end brothel that's sort of just outside of kind of like the dingy parts of Surrey Hills, and is kind of more in the like Paddington, a well-heeled corner of Paddington, the blurb says. So essentially I thought this would be for me, and unfortunately, this book did not really live up to what I was looking for. And I don't really 100% know what I was looking for, but this didn't quite get there for me. And it should have, because it had elements that should have worked for me. So anyway, it was just okay. So it's, you know, I've previously enjoyed reading about this time period and place, but this was not quite right for me. It sort of relied very heavily on literally just the briefest touch on what early Sydney was like. And I read last year Iris, which I also didn't love, but Iris was so much better than this. I mean, it had a completely different purpose. This is definitely meant to be a bit fluffier, but like, Iris felt really real, whereas this did not feel real at all. So everything I've read about this period, everything I read about this time and place, this was not a reflection of, you know. So it sort of briefly touched on things that were realistic about this time and place and career, and then missed all of the grit, really, unfortunately. Yeah, and so the realities of what it would have been like to be a prostitute in this time, in early Sydney, were not really present in this book, unfortunately. Also, this book also kind of touches on what it was like for Chinese immigrants at that time, living in Sydney, working in Sydney, sort of what the you know, the social aspects of things would have been like for them. And again, although I was glad to see it and the representation was, I thought, okay, it just didn't go deep enough for me. And it didn't feel, because I guess those characters weren't as central to the story, although the Jade Owl belongs to a Chinese woman, or is with a Chinese woman in the book, it just sort of didn't really, I don't know, it felt like picking and choosing, I guess is probably the way to say it, because yeah, it just didn't quite get there. Anyway, I gave this 3 stars. It was just okay as a read. It's fluffy, and they left room at the end for there to be more, because I feel like this is going to be a series, but I'm not going to pick up any more of them because I just didn't feel like I didn't care about the characters enough. Like, I didn't feel invested in who they were as people. So it just fell flat for me, unfortunately. So that was a shame, because I love this cover. It's really beautiful. But yeah, it just wasn't right, I don't think, which is a shame. Okay, the last book that I read was a non-fiction book, ticking off another prompt now for my non-fiction reading challenge. I've got 1 more to go in December. I've started the book. I'm hopefully going to get there. So this was a book from the 000s, and that was the prompt that I was meeting, the call number being 069. And the book is Decolonized Museums by Shimrit. This was a really, really interesting book. So I don't know if you're already familiar with the concept of decolonization, or colonization for that matter. But I live in a colonial country, so a country that was colonized by the British. So it's definitely of deep interest to me to sort of explore what that means and how we can kind of move through that and work through that. It's about doing the work, I guess, like doing the work and acknowledging privilege, but also looking at the ways that our institutions kind of continue the colonial mindset, and it might not be something that we're conscious of. So I guess this is about making conscious things that are unconscious. So this is to do with museums, and it talks about art museums as well as, you know, object museums, the, you know, natural history, and also, you know, cultural type museums. So there's all sorts of different things that are kind of explored in this book. Now, I started reading the book, and there is an introduction by the series editor, I believe. Yes, an editor's preface. And I read that and I immediately got a little bit put off because what the editor says is that they will never set foot in a museum again, and perhaps you'll be moved to do the same. And I was like, I don't know that that's what I want as an outcome of reading this book. You know, I don't know that I want to necessarily, you know, and so I think it gave a false sense of what this actually, what the author of the book is actually saying, because they don't say you shouldn't go into a museum ever again. And they certainly, that's not what the book is about. But I kind of got an ominous feeling from that preface. So just if you are going to read this book, be aware that that's not what is reflected in the book. The book is certainly very critical of museums. So it's looking at what has, you know, sort of the history of museums and where they've sort of come from, and the ways in which they perpetuate colonial thinking, and sort of continue, you know, how they got their collections, for example, how they focus different artists and creators as in art museums as well. So, like, you know, the kind of things that museums are trying to do now to either actually attempt to decolonize their collections and their exhibits, or performatively look as though they're decolonizing. So there's a lot to think about in this book, a lot to unpack. I would recommend it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. But yeah, as I said, the foreword by the series editor was off-putting for me. And also, yeah, so that was probably my main criticism of the book, which is not really a criticism of the book so much as the preface. The author builds her case really well, and I think she's done a fantastic job of highlighting what needs to be highlighted and sort of structuring her argument and evidence around sort of central themes of the ways in which she believes that decolonization can come about, like what you need to look for and then sort of what you need to unpack to do that. So yeah, overall this was a really enlightening book, and I think it would be, if you're interested or if you're on your decolonization journey as I am, then this is certainly something to make you think and to kind of give you pause as you know, utilize museums and what that means for not only just the collections that they have, but also like what it means to put a museum somewhere and how that impacts the community, you know, the gentrification of a community, for example. So yeah, it was really, really interesting, and I would recommend. So that's my wrap up for the month of November. I'm very excited to continue on into December and sort of finish off some of my reading goals and, you know, try to get where I wanted to be by the end of this year in terms of meeting those. So let's do it. December, let's go. I'm excited. So let me know if you've read any of these books down in the comments below. Did you have the same experience as me or different? Have I highlighted a book for you that you are now interested in having a look at? I'd love to hear all about it down in the comments. Better get that. Bye.